Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Masters of Marketing. Now, not only am I super excited to have someone from my home country on, from the UK, this is Suni Sekhon, who is the founder of DEFY Brands, who work with companies such as Redefine Meat, BeWise, and Elite Green. So, Sunny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's amazing for us to be connecting. It's been a long time coming, and what a great start to the day. So, thank you so much, and I'm excited to look forward to the rest of the session.
You're so welcome. Yes, for anyone who obviously won't know, we had everything from tech issues to illness to everything else that could have stopped this podcast happening, but we got through and we showed the universe that we were doing it regardless. So, Sunny, what does DeFi Brands do?
So, we're a brand impact agency, and we help food and drink brands to think a bit more regeneratively. How can you take that thinking into more competitive advantage by using real time AI, foresight, cultural intelligence, and we try and come out with bold strategic strategies. And it's storytelling that genuinely is driving impact in the world.
Brilliant. So, you guys do a lot, and I'm going to pick up on the first word that I hear about, but I don't really know much about to kind of be very transparent. Regenerative. Is that to do with branding? Is it to do with marketing? How do you guys use it?
I think regenerative for us is more about the state of play of our economy right now. So I think if we
Mm-hmm.
step back and we look at what's happening in today's reality, there's about just over 281 million people who are suffering from acute
Mm-hmm.
food insecurity. Roughly about 733 million people who are facing chronic malnutrition. These numbers are big, and by
Yeah.
2100, the population is expected to exceed about 11.2 billion. Now, the current systems, the way we are producing, generating food, looking after consumers' welfare, healthcare, it's broken right now. And if we're going to secure future resiliency, if we're going to make sure that we have food security, which is the number one United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, we have to
Mm-hmm.
think about how we're going to reimagine food systems. And that's where the regenerative economy for us comes in.
Wow, that's incredible because we've spoken to people in the past about sustainability, about environmentalism, and obviously there's so many different layers where things overlap to marketing. But I would say that this is such a niche, a niche area that's so important. And like you said, it links to the UN, it links to everything. That's
Absolutely.
incredible.
Absolutely. And I think with sustainability, which is, for a lot of people, which is a brilliant start. And I think 15% of global businesses out there are on target to meet the sustainability development goals. However, with sustainability, the clue's in the title. It's only ability to sustain. It's not a long-term strategy. And what we need
Mm.
is a reimagining thinking about the ecosystems, communities, and cultures. And I think, where brands are in such a saturated market, this is genuinely at the forefront, it's cutting edge, but it's doing more good and less harm.
Which is exactly what I feel every brand needs and wants. That's
100%.
it. We have so many kind of buzzwords with greenwashing and pinkwashing and every other type of washing that you have, and there's the connotations underneath that's
Mm,
very negative. Obviously, it's very negative, but you have those connotations with it, and this is something like you said that's easier to do and good. There's
mm.
really not many negatives to it at this point.
Absolutely. So I think, where possible, I think every food brand should be thinking a bit more about how we're creating the right systems, how we're reimagining. And I think, rather than reinventing or pioneering new systems, let's go back. Let's think about how we can connect, how we can do things a lot more better.
So how would that fit into branding then? Because I'm sure that people will be listening to this and going like, "Oh, that's really interesting," but where does that fit into my brand? Where does that fit into my marketing? Where would you come if I was a hypothetical client coming to you?
I would think a bit more about, and I think it kind of links a bit more into why we became B Corp. It's a bit more about actually what are we in the business or in the world for doing? Why do we exist? What is our purpose? And it's again the word why. How are we going to create genuinely systemic change? How are we going to make sure that we give back, and whether it's from an environmental point of view or from a social impact point of view, and it comes back to your brand's DNA from your DNA, this is how you're going to build out a, a very competitive brand, but a compelling brand. Listen, it's 70% of global consumers who are expecting all these businesses to do a lot better. They want resiliency, they
Yeah.
want transparency, they want better from businesses. If you're not tapping into that 87% of conscious consumers out there, then your brand is lagging, and there's nothing that marketing is going to fix in that scenario.
And that's a very brutal truth, I think, for a lot of people to hear, because you'll be doing so much with your marketing, but you're completely right. If it's not in
Absolutely.
the brand's DNA, it's not going anywhere. So you mentioned about, being a B Corp. So what is the power of being a B Corp or the B Corp movement?
I think for us, it's the credibility. When we set up DeFi, we had nothing to look up to, as in, hey, we've got, really good standards out there in terms of other businesses. I'd come from an industry where good was not good. And I think that was a lack of awareness, understanding that businesses can be profitable if they are doing the right things in terms of looking after its people, looking after its culture. And for us, B Corp came at the right time. It was all about having that compass around purpose and profit. What is it that we can do in our business, our day to day, and make sure that we're not compromising on our ethics? We've got transparency, credibility is always at the forefront, but it's the things that we're doing that is going to make that impact. So the B Corp for us was, and the assessment was eye opening. It was looking at ways at how we're taking our valuables and how we're making this into a measurable action to make sure, things like it's going to keep us continually on guard in terms of the people we want to be part of our ecosystem. And that goes from the talent to the suppliers and to the partners and our customers who we work with. We really do value making sure we have the same alignment, that we can build measurable action. And therefore, B Corps reshaped the way businesses should operate and think internally as well as externally about how we can be that force for good.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, I mean, that just kind of covers why it's, becoming a certified B Corp in like branding and credibility. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there. So what would you say is like the certification process and how that shapes maybe the values and the storytelling? Because I think, we've kind of been talking about the foundations, but how does that reflect like ripple effect into storytelling for a
Yeah.
brand?
So I think for us, having the accreditation, it's opened up doors in terms of conversations, whether it's with procurement, because procurement are challenged with making sure that they are vetting all their supplies stringently, and we are ones that can come in and demonstrate our ESG value. We can kind of show like these are the values that matter to us. This is why we're in the business around what we're doing, how we're championing diverse voices around equality, gender equity, the solutions we're offering. So it's a badge of honor, I'd look at it, but it's more a lever of change. So I think, the work that we're doing with other B Corps, with other social enterprises, whenever we mention things like this on social media, we see more inbound activity occurring, that, women supporting women, more social enterprises working together, and B Corps collectively coming together and creating their own ecosystem to try and think about how can we genuinely create that change in the world and what is it collectively we can do together.
So I think like kind of to use a phrase I used earlier, is it has a ripple effect for the brands on the other end. Because obviously you guys, know what you're doing with it, but there will be brands that have people in marketing at all different levels and going up to, people who aren't even in marketing who will see this as is it worth having it on there? Like kind of where does it come from and why should it be integrated
Yeah.
into the marketing? So to have that as a ripple effect of like, it's actually just not to say it's a stamp, but yes, it is
Yeah.
something that goes on and that you're working with it, but it has all of these positive connotations that ripple into different areas of your
100%,
marketing.
100%. But I think one of the things you genuinely have to do is sit back and think, is this for me? It's not for everyone. I mean, if you're struggling to think about why are we in the world and what's our purpose and why do we exist and how does that positively, impact the right people? How do we give back to communities? How are we creating better for our environments? If you're really struggling with these things, and perhaps that demonstrates that actually there's a white space opportunity for you there to think a bit more about
Yeah.
actually how can we reinvent ourselves, or actually there's other organizations, we've helped others on their B Corp journey, and they're like, wow, there's a lot that we're already doing, but we didn't even think that that was a measurable impact. And I think that's a key thing. Being certified B Corp, it's a continuous journey. So I'm constantly measuring everything that we're doing. We've got an assessment coming up, so it's every 3 years you're reassessed. So it's not, well done, you've certified, you've joined the community and off you go. It's like, actually, what are you doing? How is this continuing? How are you building your impact?
So for the consumer, so say an enterprise did go, do the B Corp certification, it is also literally saying we're so committed to this that we're going to be
Absolutely.
working on this
Absolutely.
24/7. Okay, maybe not 24/7, let's say 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
Absolutely.
It's ongoing, and it's a commitment which is no matter what the company size, but especially I think for enterprises can be incredibly powerful, because you're absolutely right. A lot of consumers want to be more sustainable, but that reflects into, oh, we don't have the money to do this, or we don't have this, or we don't have
Absolutely.
that. And even having that trust in a
Yeah.
company
And I just
can
think to
be
myself,
can be
it's
huge.
it's it's small steps to take, and I think we're on that journey, and it's opening doors with brands that we've never thought that we'd been able to work with, but we are working with them because they also know this. We're going to be recertified in 3 years' time, so it's in our best interest to make sure that we're adhering to the policies that we put in place. And B Corp was brilliant for me because there were policies I hadn't even thought about. There were ways of working that were new to me, and it's just like creating a whole new kind of like way of working aligned to, actually, you're right, this should be effortless, it should be kind, and it should be giving, and that's what we are doing.
That's brilliant. I love that as a little like wrap up for that.
Yeah.
So to kind of like continue with what DeFi Brands do and kind of the area of marketing that you guys are in, we've kind of talked before that you do kind of branding beyond profit. Now, this is not saying that the marketing that you guys do doesn't focus on a profit for a company. And I think let's clear that up now. But you look at branding going beyond the profit line, right?
Absolutely. And I think where we're probably going more so with this is we think a bit more about if I look at our own internal operations, and I think what DeFi systemically stands on is gender equality,
Okay.
inclusivity, and thinking more about that environmental responsibility. So, how are these going to be much more powerful in terms of like how we're building the right kind of like business? And I think coming from an industry where, it's pretty much male dominated, and I think what we can do in terms of working with, some of the brands we're working with, and they are women-owned brands and they gravitate towards us. I'm a woman-owned founder, ethnic minority. We employ 87% women. They resonate with this, and I think we bring divergence. We have perspectives that are out of the box, and I think having all of this that comes together really is much stronger as a strategic kind of like lever, and it attracts the right talent. I've said customers are very, very interested in our story, but it's talent as well. And I think that's the most important thing. So I think there's a lot, and I think brands want to engage with other brands that are doing something that is creating this change.
I no, I completely agree, and I think it's really interesting to hear you say that, because it's something that enterprises and corporations, the larger companies, it's that they are aware of. It's not that they're not, but like how to get into it. So, say for example, an enterprise was coming to you and kind of going like, we want to have more like branding, like beyond profit. What would you say they need to be looking internally for in order to do that?
I think they need to go back to their values. If they want to be doing more than, thinking more about, sorry, thinking less about their profits. Every business has an opportunity to create the right impact, and it could be something that's quite personal to you. It could be something that ranges from inequality. It could be healthcare. It could be something that's happening in your community. It could be something that's grassroots based. Someone's always got a passion within them, and I think if you can collectively think about how do we use our business as that vehicle to help others or help, create the right impact in our community. And I often think it's really simple things. It's eight people. Think about the culture. What is it that you've built this team, your brand or your marketing teams around? And it's people inevitably, and people buy from people. So what is it that you're doing to make sure the culture fit is right? People feel like, yeah, I want to be part of that. That's my community. And I always think, find your tribe. So think about people, think about the community you're in. That's wider kind of dominance. We've just got, I'm here in the southwest of London, and there's some really large corporations here. You think about, what are you doing to give back immediately into that pocket of London, not just to the London economy, but what are you doing in the southwest region of London? And then I think broadly, it's like, we're all guilty of this. What's our environmental impact? So how can these brands or these marketing teams step back and think about, okay, we're making our profit, but actually that's all great, but what are we doing around people, community, and the environment?
And I think that then trickles into anything from employer branding to
100%.
happiness in the workplace to,
Yeah.
and then, to bring it back to the kind of the most obvious flashy one is like, can it be shown on social media? Absolutely. It's something that it doesn't have to be. I like the fact that you were kind of referring to something local, because it doesn't have to be something global and massive. And we're doing this across 15 countries. It is our main office, or our 5 main offices are in these cities.
Yeah.
So what can we do within these cities? And then that does have the knock-on effect into marketing at all levels. Socials,
100%.
it will be on the B Corp is on the website, everything else, there's commitment, and it trickles down and it becomes almost a content pillar, I think. Like, from what you're saying, it would
100%.
become a content pillar.
And I think quite often companies, quite they forget about thinking about, you know, things like what we do to genuinely create things that could be the right culture. It's always great where, as a content pillar, to your point, you're talking about, hey, we sponsored events, or we're having a Christmas or a Thanksgiving, or we're doing something around Easter. And these are like in the moment, but actually, what are they connected to? So strategically, again, think about, if anyone's creating any content, that's what you'd think about. Like, what are the things that we want to talk about? We want to talk about our business. We want to talk about what it is that we do. We want to talk about what makes us. We want to talk about the effect that it has with our customers, their achievements, etc. So you're always thinking about those pillars. People often forget that impact pillar, and they kind of run into those the kind of posts that I just think are very temporary. But actually, there could be more depth in these if you genuinely do build out more impact.
So to kind of highlight on a word that you just said, because you were saying impact, and
Yeah.
maybe I love playing devil's advocate a little bit. Impact washing. Now that's a thing. Like, that's something that's, I think you can see it in a lot of different companies, but like, what is impact washing? How can you avoid it? And like, how can an enterprise kind of ensure authenticity?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there, whether it's impact washing, greenwashing, there's a lot of washing of any sort out there. And I think, do you know what? It's in the world that we are with digital so far advanced, the fact that we're so interconnected, no sooner can someone say something, create a situation, it's on social media. We hear about it
Yeah.
instantly, judgments, opinions are formed of it. So I think you really do need to be careful about what's happening and what you're saying. And I think, the other flip side to that is more companies and more brands are genuinely kind of worried about, oh, should we be saying that? Should we be doing that? So it's on the other side, it's created a challenge where some people are like, well, actually, I don't want to step up. We have certain customers who are like, gosh, this is
Yeah.
really brilliant. We can tell this story. There's so much to be done. But people are like so cautious about, actually, is that going to cause a kind of, a cause and effect from this? But I always say, if you're staying true to who you are, you're not enhancing that story in any case or form. You're telling it for what it is. There's a commercial viability around it. So hold on to your principles. You don't compromise on things like, for example, sourcing sustainability, but you design these products that are more profitable and more scalable, and you're staying true to about the impact that's come out of that, then, you're avoiding that washing. And I think, transparency about what's been achieved, using third-party verifications. So if it's quantifiable, measurable, there's plenty of verification methods that are out there. But I think the key is it's that internal alignment in terms of every employee should really live and understand that mission, and therefore knowing it inside out, you'll soon know whether actually this does not feel right to communicate, or actually this is us. And we shouldn't be, we shouldn't feel too scared to talk to the world about what we're doing, because it is a genuine impact that we're creating.
I really like that. And I liked also, you were very upfront about it's out on social media. Like the minute something
Yeah.
happens, it is out. And it just always reminds me of like there's a obviously marketing is now you have marketing as the umbrella title, and then it's really like digital marketing. Like that's where it dives in. And I always think that there was a phrase that I don't even know if it's that relevant anymore, which is, all PR is good PR. And I'm kind of
Yes.
like, maybe nowadays that's actually not, because it used to be more that it wasn't online straight away. It did become, and we're going to go very British with this reference. So if
Yeah.
anyone doesn't get it, drop a comment. That like, it's today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. I think that's, that was
100%.
like, it's printed. And then for anyone who doesn't know, you used to go to a fish and chip shop in the UK and they would put the fish and chips in the newspaper. I love the idea of that, but
Yeah.
like, that's not really a thing anymore.
No.
And I think that that's kind of almost where it's coming from, is that it's changed. Like
It has
that's
changed, yeah.
and that's where the washing has come in, because it used to be that it was, you can kind of, shove that away. All PR is good PR. At least the name's out there, but no one's going to remember it because something else is coming. Whereas we have receipts these days,
Yes.
and that's
Everything's
yeah.
documented, and it's out there. And I think that's why people are either super cautious, or they just think,
Mm-hmm.
I think we can get away with that, and it's going to be absolutely fine. And you're just like, actually, you're not going to get away with it, because someone is going to unpick it. So you've just got to be very careful.
Yeah, absolutely. So this definitely kind of leads into like purpose-led marketing. That this is ultimately kind of where you guys are coming in else. So what would you say is the future of purpose-led marketing? Like, do you think that enterprises and corporations and other companies of different sizes should be focusing on it?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what size your business is, where you're based, whether you're a startup or you're very much established. I think the future is going to be. I've touched on it very lightly before. It's going to be about doing less harm. You've got to think about what is your
Mm-hmm.
business that you're doing, these better business decisions that you're making, and I think these are the kind of brands that are going to get. They're going to be ahead. They're going to be the ones that thrive, and they're going to be the ones that more conscious consumers are going to be attracted to. We're in a
Mm-hmm.
an era of like Generation Z, which is going to be, or they are the largest cohort right now. So if you're not appealing to the largest market that's buying right now, you just become more redundant and you're just not relevant anymore.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like some of our listeners will be going, "What do you mean? There's another generation coming on?" Like we just had it, like, Gen Z is just, we're just not on board with them. Like and it all changes again. And this is,
Absolutely.
a kind of a really good awakening. I think that it's every part of your marketing is going to become more impact driven as the generations come up and have more of a focus on it. And there is no way in the news today that you can get away with anything. Like, everything is fundamentally leads back to the impact in whatever area it's doing. So that's really interesting. I'd never thought of it from a generational point of view, but I really like that. Okay, so to tangent again slightly, because
Okay.
this is how I talk. Um, we've talked a lot about kind of advantages and disadvantages and all of that, but you do something called kind of purpose driven pitching. Now, from the enterprise kind of, if they're looking at these purpose driven pitching, what should they be looking for?
I think so.
Or what should be included, maybe?
Yeah, so if we look at when we're invited by, whether it's Social Enterprise UK, they run quarterly sessions where they invite recommended social enterprises like ours, and
Mm-hmm.
we have the opportunity to pitch. And being in a room full of buyers that are wanting to buy from social enterprises that have a genuine cause that they're supporting. So for us, I talk about gender equality, finding ways that we're leveling up the kind of creative services industry. We use our profits to help young girls from underrepresented communities. These are girls that perhaps won't go on to university, formal education, super smart. They've got, the simplest of ideas that can either transform not just their lives, their families' lives, but they can transform communities. They can help others. in ways that possibly can't be reimagined. And I think when we talk to more organisations about how our profits are supporting these young girls, I mean, they're pioneering, they're our future. So when we're on stage and we have an opportunity to talk about our impact, you know, there's larger organisations that have now set a buy social challenge, and that is to buy from more social enterprises. So we were invited by a large food group who they run these pitches every year. We went in the first year and we actually got to meet other people, not just the food group that were procuring from us. And in that room, there were about 20 of us, and listened to everyone's stories about helping homelessness, refugees, job enhancement, autism. I mean, you just think collectively, like, you know, we're all trying to find a little way that we can shift that little needle to do something. And it is that competitive edge where people are looking, more and more procurement teams, more organizations. And I think it goes back to, you know, any organization can think about, you know, keep it simple. What are we doing from a social point of view? What are we doing from an environmental point of view? And how can we build that into our kind of like brand or our business DNA? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It could be something that you're quite passionate about already, you may already be doing.
Yeah, I was about to say, because it can be something that, it sounds very obvious to say it, but that's linked to what an enterprise is doing already. You know, if there's something to do with water, for example, then
Absolutely.
ocean hygiene, clean up pollution, that makes more sense than, I'm just going to say, kind of like, you know, a different country doing something else in a totally different field. Because whilst all impact can, you know, the positive impact is still a good thing, from a
Yeah.
marketing point of view, you still need something that's linked to your brand, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's, I feel like, you know, does that make sense, or would you disagree?
Yeah. I think to me, you know, any organization, anyone that wants to buy from you is looking to a to reduce risk. And I think this is, you know, a way of kind of demonstrating, you know, the kind of impact is aligned to ways that we're reducing risks. We're looking at our reputational exposure. We're thinking about how we can strengthen supply chains. And, you know, I mentioned earlier on, we've won contracts specifically because buyers are incentivized by, you know, our ESG, DEI targets, and they want partners that can deliver. And I think any marketeer that's looking to attract, you know, whether it's conscious consumers, looking at ways that they can diversify, looking at their growth, you have to think about where is the economy moving right now? What is consumer appetite? What are consumers demanding for? And the stats about 87% of global consumers expecting businesses to kind of fixing some of the challenges out there. How can you not seriously take that on board? How can you sit there and just think that we're just going to carry on as business as usual? I think, you know, the whole landscape has changed, and you've got to find ways that you can keep with it and move along with it. And therefore, this should be a competitive age. This should be a way that you should kind of like reinvigorate and think a bit more about, you know, us as a business, as a brand, and what we stand up for in the world.
I love it. Absolutely. Okay, so before we wrap up, I do want to ask, what would your practical advice for marketers be who want to integrate social impact into their brand, whether it's a huge enterprise or not?
I think it's firstly, it's got to be in your strategy. So let's not think about it as in it's an add-on or it's an afterthought, and let's task it to someone else. It's got to start from the top down. It's got to be that
Yeah.
something that everyone buys into. And I think, you know, not to create something that's so convoluted, something that's going to be, you know, it's going to disrupt business operations. But what is it that our impact is in our strategy, and therefore it becomes our day to day? There, from the top down, everyone, your teams, your talent, it's part of their day to day, and everyone needs to understand why this matters to us. And I think communication is really important. So think about how you're telling those stories, data, emotion. What are you genuinely trying to achieve? And I think again, think about your ecosystem as well. How can you connect widely with more partners, your customers, etc. So just think about it more about actually having, you know, more purpose-driven marketing. It's not just about doing less business. We're just going to be doing better business. And, you know, the ones, I said it before, the brands that get it right will thrive in the decades to come ahead.
And can you think of any, kind of off the top of your head, like brands that you would recommend people to look at? Because the one that comes into my head is,
Patagonia?
and like Patagonia is absolutely one. Like that's, I don't think we can disagree. I say everyone would think of them, but they may not. Patagonia, definitely check out. And the other one is, I think that do it quite well locally, is Innocent Smoothies with their knitted hat campaign.
Oh, yeah.
like, would you say that's kind of the like a good example of impact of it goes everywhere because they include a community of people who wouldn't have maybe the socialization, they wouldn't have this income coming in, they create this incredible marketing drive on social media through it, and it's ultimately, especially when I found out about it, I was like, oh, cute little hats. Like it's, and then as I progressed in my marketing career, I was like, genius knitted hats. Like it
Yeah,
all comes in. And talking to you, I literally days in my head just slid in going, oh, wow, that was, that's impact marketing. That's a
yeah.
good example. Would you say, are there any other brands that have?
I think there's some really good ones out there. I think one that's going to be, people might just say this is controversial, is Ben and Jerry's. Look what's just happened recently, departing from the
Yes.
brand because they don't want to lose that political voice of theirs. So, sometimes it may not be a blatant marketing tactic, but it could be standing up for something. I think some of the brands that are out there in terms of like, they're purpose led in terms of whether it's marketing or, some of their what's core to the ethos. I think everyone knows about Patagonia, their focus on environmentalism, the mission to save our home planet. It's in everything they do. Whether it's their product, their marketing, they genuinely have a mighty force that are connected together. Dove's a
Yeah.
really good example as well. I love how Dove thinks about beauty and a positive experience, especially for women. It's so harsh, it's so
Yeah.
tough. So their campaign for real beauty genuinely does hit a lot, half the population, dare I say, all as women. Tom's known for its one-on-one, one-for-one model. So where you purchase a pair of shoes and they donate a pair of shoes. I mean, that is a great, it comes from a sad story if you Google what Tom's is all about. But when you think about its business model and how what it's doing in terms of helping others. And there's so many on there. I can keep going on. Warby Parker's a great one. They do affordable, stylish glasses, and every pair of glasses they sold, they give a pair to someone in need. So I think there's a lot of brands that are out there, and I think they connect their purpose. They think about what their impact is in the world, and they've just got some great marketing campaigns that come off the back of it.
I love that. And I think anyone who's listening, like these are really good examples just to go and research. It's this is how it filters down almost. You can see how it filters down to this is where the storytelling comes from, this is why we were set up, all of this. And you can start to see almost like the roots of a tree, almost like it goes down and down and down in these different layers. And you look at it then in reverse of going like, look, this is where it started off. This wasn't the point of the company to start off with. That's completely fine. But it goes up and up and up, and it's become all of this. So it needs to be integral to the company. Well, Sunny, thank you so much for coming to chat to us. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it. And Sunny, like I said, thank you so much for coming on.
No worries, you're so welcome. And I really enjoyed our conversation. And I do hope it provides some inspiration, but if not, just some context of like where the world is moving to right now. So thank you so much, Tara.
Of course, thank you. Well, for everyone listening, this has been Masters of Marketing, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks.